For centuries, one figure from the New Testament has carried a remarkably bad reputation. We know him as Doubting Thomas. His name has become a universal shorthand for a specific moral failing, the stubborn, intellectual skeptic who refuses to believe without hard physical proof. This cultural trope often teaches us to aggressively suppress our own questions. We learn to fear the longing for outcomes that seem too good to be true, assuming that any hesitation is a sign of weakness. But there is a glaring problem with this narrative. It hinges on a linguistic misunderstanding that has been hidden in plain sight for generations. If you examine the original ancient Greek text of the Gospel of John, the specific word for doubt does not actually appear anywhere in the passage. This discovery shifts the entire focus of the encounter. Rather than a debate over intellectual facts, the text describes a response to a much deeper, more human crisis.
To see what's really happening, we have to look at the environment where this story begins. It's the evening of the first Easter. The disciples are huddling in a house defined by darkness and locked doors, paralyzed by a very real fear of execution. When Jesus suddenly stands among them, he performs a highly symbolic act. He breathes on them, telling them to receive the Holy Spirit. In the context of John's Gospel, this mirrors the creation story in Genesis, framing this moment as a new birth for the group. Early Christian communities internalized this concept of physical breath as the primary way spiritual authority was transmitted from one person to another. We see the legacy of this belief in historical anecdotes like the Coptic Patriarch of Alexandria, who reportedly filled a leather skin with his own breath and sent it downriver to Ethiopia to be released over a newly ordained leader. However, Thomas was entirely absent during this physical communal experience. He was the only one who didn't witness the new creation or feel the breath of his teacher. When his friends later claim they've seen the Lord, Thomas demands to touch the nail marks himself. This reaction functions as a classic psychological shield. He is guarding himself against the vulnerability of magical thinking after witnessing a traumatic execution. His skepticism is a traumatized human's defense against the possibility of being disappointed by a hope that feels entirely too good to be true. A week later, Jesus returns specifically for Thomas. He offers physical intimacy and an invitation to touch his wounds, approaching him with open arms rather than a lecture. This is where the translation error usually occurs. Most English Bibles record Jesus saying, "Do not doubt, but believe." The literal Greek translation reveals a different message. Do not become faithless or mistrustful, but faithful, trust-filled. Biblical faith in this specific Greek context refers to the active choice to rely upon something. It is a decision to trust that a person is worthy of your reliance, even when intellectual certainty remains elusive. There is a significant difference between intellectually accepting a factual claim and choosing to trust a person in the midst of a crisis. Jesus is identifying a crisis of relational trust, proving that questions and faith can occupy the same space without contradicting one another. By removing the tone of rebuke from the text, we see that feelings of confusion and incredulity are ubiquitous human experiences. These struggles can actually serve a purpose, stripping away the superficial fluff of our beliefs to reveal something more resilient underneath. Often, the experience of doubt is a thin disguise for our deepest desires, a longing for closeness, peace, and the assurance that we aren't alone. This internal friction is like a butterfly violently beating its wings against the walls of a cocoon. The struggle is the very thing that prepares us to break out into a new, wider reality. This story invites us to identify the things in our own lives that we've dismissed as too good to be true, the reconciliations we've given up on, or the peace we assume is impossible. The encounter with Thomas offers the assurance that our skepticism and our locked doors cannot disqualify us from grace. It proves that even when hope seems lost, the end is never actually the end.